Here we are, Chapter 14, Delivering the Speech. Glad you made it. We've spent quite a few sessions on how to put a speech together, and now we're going to look at what it takes to deliver one successfully when you stand up and actually start speaking. The question is today we're going to tackle what is the key to a good delivery. If you're going to deliver a great public speech, what's the key to the great delivery? And it's simply this, that you have to have a strong desire to communicate with the audience. If you really want to get your message across to listeners, you're going to do well. And things like eye contact and gestures and all that other stuff, that's going to take care of itself. But you need to speak with power. You need to speak with energy. And as we go through this chapter, we're going to take a look at some techniques that are going to help you improve your delivery. But just keep in mind that the most important element is that you must have this strong desire to communicate with your audience. You have to be passionate about what you're talking about. So there are 4 basic methods of speaking and giving speeches today that we're going to look at, and we're going to look at each method. The first method is memorization. And some speakers try to deliver a speech from memory. They write it all down, they spend some time memorizing it, and then they deliver it. And what happens occasionally, well, let's just be honest, it's a disaster. At some point, speakers can suddenly forget what comes next, and then they get flustered and frustrated, and they throw up their hands, and then they quit. And memorizing a speech is just simply not a good idea. Even if you remembered your entire speech, you would be speaking from your memory, and you would not be speaking from your heart. That could cause you to sound flat. That could make you sound artificial. And it also can make you sound boring. And remember, if you are coming across as boring, people are not going to be listening to you and tuning into the things that you have to say as if you were speaking in a different method. So memorization's not a good idea of speaking. Some speakers choose to speak from a manuscript, and basically what they do is put their entire speech word for word on a manuscript. They write it all down. And this method is often used at things like government hearings or scientific explanations or conferences where every word is going to eventually appear in printed form. If you're not in one of those situations, if you're not like in a scientific field or doing something for the government, this is really not a recommended method of speaking. Again, you come across as inauthentic because you're not very expressive. You're reading. There's a definite difference between your speaking voice and your reading voice. Your audience can get bored. We've all been here when we see people who just read their speeches. They're dull. And you don't want that. So unless you're outside of those couple of specialized fields like the government or the science community, manuscripts are not the best. And then another method of speaking is the impromptu method, such as this guy here. He was asked to speak on the spur of the moment on a topic at a public meeting, and he's using what we call the impromptu method. That means you speak with little or absolutely no preparation. If you have at least a few minutes to plan your message, you can probably do some things to help yourself out, like decide on the key point that you want to make so that you're not rambling when you get up there. And maybe you can kind of come up with your conclusion to kind of hammer home your point. You don't want to drag out your remarks if you're ever called to impromptu speak. This is just, everyone expects it to be brief. So don't think you have to keep going on and on and on. And don't apologize. Everyone understands you were put on the spot. And so you don't have to apologize for no preparation. They're not looking for a perfect speech here. Just do your best. Kind of get your main point and how you're going to conclude what you're talking about, and just be brief if you've ever called to speak on an impromptu. The last one we're going to look at here is the extemporaneous, and this is the butter zone. This is where we want public speaking to land. In extemporaneous speaking, you spend a great deal of time preparing and practicing your speech. And when you stand up to speak, you talk in a very natural, conversational manner. Lots of eye contact. You have brief notes to help keep you on track. This is the method that is the most popular in speeches today because it's the most effective. You are very relatable. You are prepared, but you're not reading. You're not coming from memory, but you have done enough practice and preparation that it just comes across as natural. Now, a lot of people think that they have to have the greatest voice in the world. this nice, rich, deep tone or something like that. And the truth is, yeah, having a good voice is nice and it helps when you speak in public, but it is absolutely not necessary. You don't have to have the greatest voice in the world to come across as a very successful public speaker. So let's look though at some of the things that you can do to help maximize the effectiveness of your voice and the quality of your voice. The first thing is volume. Look at this instructor in this classroom. It makes you wonder if they're speaking loud enough so everyone in the room can hear. Obviously, there's some electronic equipment. I'm sure there's some noise associated with those computers that they're using. Is this instructor speaking loud enough? You can tell if your volume's loud enough by looking at the people in the back row. Watch them. If someone in the back row is leaning forward and maybe they have this kind of quizzical look on their face, it's probably because they can't hear you. Then obviously, if that's happening, you need to speak up, speak louder. If you're going to be in a large room or an auditorium, obviously you're going to use a microphone. When you use a microphone, you don't have to shout into it, though. Just speak in a normal speaking voice and let the equipment do its job. Make sure you're using an adequate volume for the room that you're in, however. Look at this guy here. You can tell just by his facial expression that he probably doesn't fully understand a speaker because they're not pronouncing their words clearly and distinctly. You have to use crisp enunciation. Is there enough expressiveness and articulation in your voice? Are you using a different pitch? Are you going up and down? Are you varying the pitch? Are you speaking too fastly? Are you speaking too slowly? What's your intonation like? Do you have awkward pauses? Are you pausing for long times? Or are you using vocal fillers like and and all that good stuff? You have to be careful with your voice. Now, we live in the South, and so this is going to be picking on us, and maybe you're not from the South. Maybe you're from the North listening to this or in the class, and that's okay. But I'm just going to kind of hit on some of the things that we suffer from here in the South when it comes to our pronunciation. Do you say already or all right instead of already or all right? You have to make sure you get the L in there. That will help your vocal performance. How about the T and the D? You know they're not interchangeable, right? Do you say quality instead of quality, or didn't instead of didn't? Yep, sometimes we do that. We flip them around. You have to be cognizant of how you are speaking. Do you say, and this is my problem when I'm at home, I say this, especially coming from close to Cajun country, do you say ax instead of ask? Think about it. I will ask him if he wants to come. With an invitation like that, who's probably going to decline. No, don't ask him. You ask. There's a S and a K there. Make sure you get that in there. How about the R versus our syndrome? Our isn't as in our house. It's pronounced as the same as it is in hour, like time, not the letter R. So be careful of that. It's our house. Do you shorten the word probably to probably? Or probably? Listen to yourself carefully. The next time you say it, just in a conversation, be cognizant of how you say it. A lot of us cut this word in half. And you know what else we do? It's surprising how many people don't know how to spell probably, because we mispronounce it. And when we mispronounce it, we misspell it. What about this one, the I and E confusions? A lot of Americans will make the E and the I interchangeable when they speak. For instance, do you have a pen or a pencil I can write with? No, it's a pen or a pencil. It's a big difference. So be careful the way that you use your vowels in your words as well. It's about them. And this one some people suffer with. I don't know a lot of people who do this, but do you say them instead of them? You're not alone, but if you do it, try to avoid it. And the number 8 is this, fur-free. Do you substitute fur for for? Oh, this is a Southern thing all the way. Fur for for. When calling someone to the phone, do you say, it's for you? Or keep the fur on the animals, y'all. That's where it belongs. And look at number 9. Getting the gist of it. The word is just, not gist. Try to remember as in justice. That's where you want to say just. It's not just, it's just. So be careful with those. The next thing you need to think about in your vocal performance is your expressiveness. You have to speak very conversationally. Your voice should sound as animated and as expressive as it does when you carry on a conversation with someone that you enjoy, like a friend or a loved one. You need to speak at a rate that makes it easy for the audience to absorb your ideas. Remember, if you go too fast, they're not going to be able to soak in what you have, and if you go too slow, it becomes a bit of interference. So make sure that you're using your pauses appropriately. They can be very dramatic when you use them. And it gives your audience the time to soak in your last statement. But make sure your pauses are not filled with the ums and the uhs and the ahs or the okays or, you don't want those. Those vocal fillers will take away. The expression and the way that you use your expression in sentences absolutely changes the meaning of what you're saying. For example, watch me give different expression to different sentences here. Watch. I did not say he beat his wife. Now watch what I do. I did not say he beat his wife. 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 Now, you see, all the words in bold, I put a different expression. I went up, I inflected up, and it changes the meaning. Every one of these sentences means something different. So be careful with the way you use your expressions when you speak. Now, we're going to go into nonverbal communication just for a moment, and nonverbals are all those messages that you're going to be sending to your audience without even using words. What you convey with your eyes, with your facial expressions, your posture, your body movement, and the characteristics of your voice. So let's look at some of those right now. One of the things that a lot of people will take a look at you and decide whether you are trustworthy or whether they should invest the time listening, unfortunately, is your personal appearance. Make sure that when you speak, that you are well groomed, that you are attractively dressed. Here's the rule of thumb. You should dress up just a bit. Whatever level your audience is at, you go one step above. So that means if your audience is in business casual and you're speaking to that audience, you should be wearing a suit or a business professional attire for a woman. If they are in just, jeans and polos, well, then you can go business casual. You should always go one step above what your audience is. That gives you an air of professionalism. So make sure that you take the time to brush your hair that morning. Make sure that you go just one step above what your audience will be dressed as. Eye contact is extremely important. You need to be looking at your audience like the majority of the time. And when I say majority, I mean a vast majority, like 95% of the time. You need to be looking at your audience. Look at all parts of the audience. Don't just find one person and stare them down. And glancing at your notes is not a problem. Look down, take a look at them, use them. That's what you have your notes there for, your note cards. But just do it occasionally. And don't look at the floor and don't look at the wall. Those are bad habits that some of us have. We're looking up, but we're not looking at the people. I always suggest a Z pattern when you're looking at your audience. Start in the back left-hand corner of the room and look at a group of 3 or 4 people for 2 or 3 seconds. And then go to the back right hand of the room and look at a group of 3 or 4 people over there for 2 or 3 seconds. And then come to the middle of the room, the very middle of the room, and hit those people there, and then the front left, and then the front right, and just make a Z pattern. You can, and then reverse it, go backwards, do whatever you can. Just go around the room with eye contact. People will listen to you when you have good eye contact. Your facial expressions are going to express whatever emotion that you have that is appropriate at that moment in a speech. We have to be careful of that because you want to be smiling if something's funny or you are enthusiastic about something. Or if there's a very serious point, let your face reflect it. Or if it's sad, let your face reflect it. Don't suppress your enthusiasm you feel about your topic. If it's emotional, let your face show it. People connect with those things. Watch your posture. Look at the lady on the left. I see this a lot of times in public speeches, especially in the classroom. Students will have a tendency to lean on the podium instead of holding themselves up like the gentleman on the right-hand side. Hold yourself up. Just stand on your own 2 feet. Don't slouch on the desk. Don't lean on the lectern. Stand straight up. Try to be comfortable, but be poised and be alert. Be ready to speak. Don't be afraid of movement, but you don't feel like you have to move around a lot. You can move around during your speech, especially if you're giving some kind of a demonstration or you're going to be interacting with your audience in some way. But don't pace back and forth like a caged animal, okay? Don't burn a hole in the carpet in front of the podium. If you have keys or change in your pocket, make sure you refrain from jingling them. That's going to distract your audience, and you definitely don't want to do anything to take away their attention from what you're saying. Make sure you use your notes. Remember, we have speaker's notes that we speak from, not an outline. These are the cards like this gentleman's left hand. These are brief notes, brief statements that help keep our mind on track. Glance at them every once in a while to make sure you're on track, but do not stare at them, okay? Don't read them or absentmindedly stare at them because that's going to be a distraction. Also, if you have cards, don't clank them on the lectern. Don't riffle them in your hands like a deck of cards. Don't play with them. Just use them as the tool they are intended to be, to keep your mind on track. And it's appropriate to use gestures and movements to accompany your words. Some of us may have a problem. Someone has told me one time they couldn't talk if their hands were behind their back or tied behind their back. They couldn't give a speech if their hands were tied. And it's true because we speak with our hands as well. But when you do gestures, make them natural, make them gracefully so that they add to your speech rather than take away from your message. Make sure that they're free to move and to make gestures, so don't grab a hold and white-knuckle the lectern. Don't jam your hands into your pockets. You want to be able to use your hands. People will respond to gestures. So how do you approach and how do you begin? Let's say you're called up and you're called to speak. The first thing you do, obviously, is get out of your seat. But you need to get out of your seat without sighing or mumbling. You need to leave that alone. You need to walk up confidently to the front of the room. Spend a couple of seconds standing in silence. This is a good time to arrange your notes on the lectern or get your first sentences firmly planted in your mind. And then look directly at the audience as you begin. Now, your ending is a little bit different. You want to say your conclusion. You want to bring it in, use that transition statement in conclusion, say your conclusion, give your clincher. When you're done, pause for just a few seconds and then ask in a sincere tone of voice, are there any questions? You want to make sure that you're not giving the appearance of being anxious to run back to your seat. Don't do that. You want to make sure that you give everybody the opportunity to just comprehend this is the end, to soak it in. Do they have a question? If not, then you can sit down. You have to be prepared for a question and answer period as well. The question and answer period is an important way for listeners to get some clarification on something that you said that they want some more information about. So you have to plan ahead of time for it. You need to know if the person who invited you to speak is actually going to allow a question and answer time. And then if so, then how much time will you have? Plan for it. Research your topic, just like you're researching for the speech itself. Remember all that information that you may have to disregard for time's sake? Keep that information handy in your mind because someone may ask a question, and in that question and answer period, you have the chance to bring up those other points that you didn't have time to include in your speech. Jot down all the questions that might come from an audience before you get up there and kind of go through them and pre-answer them. That way you're ready in case someone asks one of the questions that you kind of thought of. So how do you field questions? You need to give the audience time to think. Don't be eager to walk away. Remember, stand with an expectant look on your face. And what happens if no one asks a question? Well, you can kind of jumpstart the session by saying this. One question I'm frequently asked about this topic is, and just throw it out there and then answer it. That's going to give people the opportunity to keep thinking about their questions, as well as will give them an answer to a question they may not even realize they had already. So you've got a good kind of ground set of rules right there to help you when you field the questions. You want to be the best speaker that you can. And this is what this class is all about. Delivering the speech, doing it well. Use your voice to communicate. That's what it's all about. You don't have to be the best speaker in the world, but if you're passionate about getting your message across and you're audience centered and you are practicing how to use your voice correctly, you too can be a very successful public speaker.